Hi everyone, we are going to begin by thinking about some components of a math lesson. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see some of my slides, and I will be posting these as well to the module. And one of the things that we want to think about when we're working with students is that we're providing them opportunities, as we mentioned last week, to engage in problem solving. And so there are structures in place that will allow us to help kind of build and scaffold this problem solving with children. Land et al., they wrote a book in 2014, and they provided this sort of structure for how we should plan our lessons for mathematics. And so there's these four components. The first component is number work. The next one is problem posing, which is also sort of this launching. Some of you may be more familiar with this idea of launching. Number three is student work time, which is this also aligns with exploring. And number four is the sharing session, which also goes along with the sharing or summarizing sections that some of you may be familiar with. As you can see throughout all of these structures and these different points in time, we are constantly asking questions. We can ask these assessing questions at each different moment in time. We can engage kids in each other's ideas by asking some talk move questions. And then we can also ask some advancing questions during the student work time and the sharing time. And what you'll also notice as well as during the number work and the problem posing time, it's really important for us as teachers to anticipate solution strategies. This is a way for us to, again, think about how we might respond if kids get the right answer, how we might respond if they may not get the correct answer. And so just a way for us to prepare. During the student work time, we're not just sitting back, waiting for kids to solve problems. We are monitoring, we are going around asking questions, thinking about how they're doing. We're selecting or solution strategies that we would like to share with the class, and we're sequencing them in certain ways to ensure that our point and our goals that we want for the lesson get across. And during our sharing time, we're making sure that we're connecting the different solution strategies so kids see the connections and see how the mathematics builds on each other. I'm going to go through all of these in a little bit more details now. So our number work, this is a warm-up activity that we engage kids in. Again, this is somewhere between 5 to 15 minutes where we're just really trying to make sure that kids are warming up, getting ready for the day. And we can use this to highlight certain aspects of the lesson, or we can just kind of make it just as a review of some number sense. Some examples of these are dot talks or number talks, choral counting, which we did last week. Some of these other ones, estimation 180, invites children to estimate different quantities. Would you rather is another activity where you pose two mathematical possibilities and kids have to decide which possibility they would rather do based on the mathematics. Which one doesn't belong provides these four different options to be in a group, and the kids have to justify and explain why each one of those options does not belong with the rest of them. And number talk images is sort of the same thing as a number talk, but rather than posing a number or dots, you show a picture of the world, say of like a box of cupcakes that have some missing, and the students have to decide how many are there. So it's a really nice way to make that connection between mathematics and the real world. These are links that are available, so if you'd like to check these out, feel free to do so. Our second step is posing the problem. So once we have students warmed up, next we want to pose this particular problem, and we can do this in lots of different ways. The one thing that we really want to make sure here is that students are comprehending what's going on in the story problem. And there's lots of ways that we can pose problems. We can do this as a three-read strategy, which is when we pose the just beginning part of a question of a story problem, and we read it and we ask kids to consider what's happening in the context. Again, it's focusing on the context. The second read is really focusing then on the quantities. What do those quantities represent? And then the third read is having students come up with questions that might go along with the story stem. And this is a really nice way to, again, offer differentiation, because if you have a particular question that you would like kids to answer, if kids are finished answering that question, you can always ask them to solve some of those extra problems that the other students came up with. 3-act tasks, number choices, and numberless word problems, I'm going to go through in just a moment, can also help kids really unpack and comprehend what's happening in the story problem. And again, just a reminder, we really want to anticipate those solution strategies and responses for these particular problems. So now let's go into a little bit more depth. So these 3-act tasks, really it's again, providing mathematics in the real world. We pose a problem via a picture or a video. And the first thing we ask is, what do you notice or what do you wonder? And ask kids to estimate. Let me pull all of these up here because here's the picture. So for example, we have this picture here. We have these 2 bottles of soda and what looks like some sugar cubes. And so our first question would be for kids to ask them, what do they notice? What do they wonder? We can record those on the board, ask them to estimate a particular wondering that they might have. Then what we do is we provide, for Act 2, is we provide students with some more information. Perhaps it might be the number of ounces in each of these bottles of soda. Perhaps we share with them the number of sugar cubes. It appears perhaps one of the wonderings may be, I wonder if these amounts of sugar cubes are in this bottle of soda. So that could be one thing. And then we ask them, I guess, what the next question would be. So the question may be, how many sugar cubes would be in a large bottle of soda? And then what we have, the 3rd act, is we allow time for students to solve the problem. And many times these tasks have a video at the end that sort of confirms what the answer might be. There's a website here that provides some more information and some more tasks for you to pose to your students. The next one is differentiation with number choices. And we briefly mentioned this last week, but again, when we provide these multiple number choices, we provide access to the problem. And we also allow kids to continue to engage in the story problem if we're working with a certain group. And again, it helps them to develop these multiple strategies because they can practice what they've done before with the larger numbers. And so what might this look like? It might look like this. So you have blanks where the problems are to go, and then you have these multiple number choices, again, that perhaps will be in certain number ranges. So for example, here we have kind of lower numbers, we have some higher numbers, so it kind of reaches different kids at different levels. So again, differentiation through number choices. We can also use numberless word problems. And so this is helpful many times for when kids just randomly pick numbers out of story problems and just operate on them. And so what happens with these particular problems is that there are no numbers in the problem, so the kids can't just pick numbers out. So this is an example here where there's some mother mice and each had some babies. So it's just sort of this little stem. And then what we do is we ask the kids, what do you notice? What are you thinking about? We're constantly asking kids to notice. As you can see, it might be a theme for my class. And little by little, we start adding quantities back into the story problem to help scaffold their understanding and their thinking about these different problems. This particular website has lots of different items that you can look at and use in your own classroom. But again, this particular practice is good for if kids, again, are just picking those numbers out and not really comprehending what's happening in the story problem, but just really focused on the operations. So we've done number work is the first thing we do. We pose problems. And once we've posed the problems, now it's time for us to get out of the way and provide students time to work. And I think this is one of the sort of big points of where we depart from what we traditionally have done with mathematics, and that idea that the teacher is there to tell kids how to solve the problems. That's not our job in mathematics. We are there to scaffold and support students, but we really want to provide opportunities for kids to engage in the problem solving. And so again, we want kids to reason. We don't want them to be just rule followers. We really want them to think about what's happening in the story problem. And again, we don't just sit back. We actually question the kids. We monitor, thinking about how they're doing, thinking about what additional questions we can ask to assess and or advance their thinking. And if when we have our solution sharing time, we want to make sure that we purposely select kids that are going to share their thinking with the class, and that we order them and sequence them in a particular way. And I just wanted to share this quote that was at a conference this past year, and it says, "When teachers spend half a math lesson talking at students and showing how to get the answers, it's educational malpractice, and student learning is being compromised. And frankly, we're complicit when we look the other way." So I think this is just this really strong point that we really need to provide opportunities for kids to make sense and to think of the mathematics. And if we're doing all the thinking, kids aren't going to learn. So again, our job is not to tell kids how to solve problem. Our job is to open up spaces and opportunities for kids to engage in that practice and those ideas. And then the last part of our lesson structure is the meat of the lesson. It's really that opportunity for sharing. And so we really want to be sure that we schedule time to make sure that we have ample amount of time for kids to share their solution strategies. And this is where that modeling happens. This is where the kids learn the different strategies, but rather than them learning the strategies from us as teachers, they're learning it from other students. And so they're thinking about, how did each child think about these problems, and how are they connected? How do they build on top of each other? That's why the sequencing of the solution strategies is so important, because we want to make sure that each of those solution strategies are building on top of each other and connecting. So those are the 4 different ways that we structure lessons. And so thank you so much for listening.